we are going to build a very interesting application called Plant Scan. And the purpose for this project is to scan an image of a plant to know detailed analysis of its species, health, and care recommendations. All what you have to do is to upload the image of the plant and then click on the Analyze, and lastly, you can download the report. Below here, we can drag and drop the plant that we want to analyze, or we can click on this to select the plant that we want to analyze. And click on the Analyze Plant and let's wait. As you can see, we got the analysis about the plant, and then I can go ahead and download, and let's look at the report. And that is Plant Analysis Report, this date, and then we also have the image of that plant. So this is what we are going to build, and we're going to use Express or Node.js with Gemini AI. With this one being said, let's get into code. And to get started, unless you are familiar with Node.js or Express, and in case you want to learn more about Node.js or main stack or full stack, then you can check my main full stack course on Udemy. With this one being said, let's get into code. Before that, I'm going to show you the extension that I'm using, for example, Codium AI. This is going to help us to auto-generate some of the codes that we are going to write. So let's get into it. I have already created a folder called Plant Analysis 2, and I'm going to open the terminal and then make use of npm init -- yes. This one will give us the default configurations. And lastly, we are going to install all the packages needed. We will need Express.env to be able to access our environment variables, Multer for file upload, and PDFKit for the downloading, and hit enter. Alright, it is done. So let's go ahead and get the API key from Gemini AI. If you search Gemini API and click on the ai.google.dev, which is this one, and it says that AI for every developer. All what we need is the API key. So click on the Learn More about the Gemini API and click on the Get API key in Google AI Studio. For me, I have an API already, so I'll go ahead and create a new one and select your project and then click on the Create API key. Alright, so I'll go ahead and copy my API key. Make sure to use your own API key. So after we have initialized the project, this is what we have, and that is a package.json file. The purpose for this file is going to contain other configurations and the packages that we are going to install. I prefer to use app.js but not index. Now that we have this one, we have to add the main file as app.js. And we're going to need .env file to secure our sensitive data as Gemini API key. Alright, so let's get into the app. We're gonna have our server as const express is equal to express. I have this because of the Codium AI for the auto generation, and then the PDFKit. And we also need the fs as const fs module from Node.js. What we want is the promise. So I will say const fs promises is equal to fs dot promises. And we will need the path module and also the .env package. I'm gonna require it as require, and then access the method called .config. Now that we have this, let's continue to configure Gemini AI. So click on the API reference And then we're going to use Node.js. So click on the Node.js and it says that we have to install the npm package. So I have copied that back to my terminal, paste and enter. Alright, it is done. So let's look at the next step. We need to require it. I'm going to copy this one and back to my project. I'm going to paste that. So we have installed all the things needed to be able to use Gemini AI. Next step is we're going to have instance of the app and then the port. For the port, I'm going to specify it in my environment variable as port. So I will say port is equal to process.env. On that, we have a variable called port. If you have it, use that. Otherwise, use this one also. And below here, I'm going to start the server, which is equal to app.listen and pass in the port. Next step is we're going to configure our Express application to support file upload. So I will say configure Multer. And it goes like this. Const upload is equal to Multer and then pass in the following, that is the destination. We are going to save the file into our local machine. Therefore, we're going to use the destination and provide the folder that we want to save all the images. In this case, it's going to be upload. This means that I have to have that folder called upload. Next step is that we have to configure our Express application to accept the incoming JSON data or payload. So it's going to be as app.use and then pass in the express.json. And inside, we're going to provide the limit. So we're going to support up to 10 megabytes. This means that we are adjusting the limit of the payload that our application is going to support. Remember, a user can download, let's say, 5 megabyte PDF. So we have to configure our server to be able to pass this data back to the user. Next step is that we are going to initialize the Gemini AI So I'm going to make it as const as gen AI, which is equal to the new and then the Google generative AI, which is this one. And inside, we're going to pass in our key as process.env. And the variable here is called Gemini API key, which is this one. Next step is we're going to configure our server to be able to serve static asset. So here is going to be express.static and pass in the public folder. This means we have to add the folder as public. And inside, we're going to have index.html. Our server is going to serve the HTML file. So we're going to have our route here. And the first route is going to be app.post. And the path is equal to analyze. At the moment, I'm going to send some dummy data back to the user as res.json. And I will say success. Next is we're going to have a route for download. And that is app.post. And then the path here is equal to download. And then our callback function. At the moment, we're going to return. Before we continue, let's try our endpoint to make sure that everything is working. So I have to start my application using node-watch. Then the name of the main file, in my case, it is called app, which is this one. I'm going to hit enter. With this one, we don't need to install node mode again. Well, for some reasons, we have this error, and that is the path is wrong. This is supposed to be upload and then the / this one instead. As you can see, our server has been restarted. Now that we have our server running, let's try our endpoint. And you can use Postman, but for me, I'm going to use a tool called Tender Client. So if you search for Tender Client, it is a built-in extension for VS Code to test our API right inside Visual Studio Code. So click on these three dots for my case and then click on the Tender Client. So in here, have a new request and is equal to, remove this as HTTP, then colon / localhost, then colon the port, that is 5000, and the endpoint is called analyze. And the method is post and hit send. For some reasons, we have an error. Let's see what we have. It says that res is not defined. Let's check in the app. I forgot to pass in the rec and then the response as this. Sorry, supposed to be rec and then the response. Sorry guys, rec and response. Alright, this one will fix the issue and we have the endpoint being working. Let me delete this one. Alright, so we have the endpoint being working. The next one is the download. So I'm gonna duplicate this one, rename as download, and then the path here is download, and hit send. And indeed, we got the result. Now let's implement the analyze. So let me close these guys and let's get into the app, which is this one. Let me call this one as analyze route. So let's look at the process involved. First step is we need to find a way to allow the user to upload images. Therefore, we're going to configure the route to use Multer. And we have instance of the Multer here. So in here is going to be as this. As a second argument to the route, we're going to pass in upload.single. .single here is a method on Multer, and pass in the field name. I'm going to name it as image. You can name it whatever you want. With this one, we can access what the user is uploading on a property called rec.file. So if I log the file, which is this, let me check the terminal and let me try in the Tender Client here. And how can we upload an image using this tool? Click on the, let me have some space here. Click on the body and then form. Let me come below here like that. And then we have form fields, but what I want is the images. So let me decrease the size of it and click on the files. So in here, provide what we pass into single. In my case, it is called image. So I will say image and let me select the image that I want to upload. For example, this one, and send. Let's check the terminal. And we have the image the user is uploading. So at this point, we can send this image to Gemini AI for processing. So let me come back to the code and let's continue. So you're going to make a condition. Let me remove this one from here and let's bring try and catch. So in the try, we're going to check in case the user is not providing an image. So we say that in case the user is not providing any image, then we're going to return from this function by saying that res.status and provide a message call. Instead of this, I'm going to use error here and I will say please upload image. Else I will say const image path is equal to rec.file and we have the actual image on the property called path, as you saw in the console or the terminal as path here that corresponds to the image that we have uploaded. So if you check in the folder for upload, this is the image that we just uploaded using the Tender client. So we know the path of the image. Next step is that we have to encode the image. So here is going to be as const image data, which is equal to await the fs promise dot read file, and then pass in the image path. Then as a second argument, provide the object by using encoding, and we're going to use base 64. So now we have the prepared image. What has left is that we're going to use with the Gemini AI to process that. So I will say use the Gemini AI to analyze the image, which is equal to const image. Let me use model, which is equal to gen AI dot generative model, which is equal to that. And in here, we're gonna pass in the model as an object. And the current model by the time of watching this video is Gemini 1.5 Flash. And you can find out in the official documentation, which is this one. And that is by the time of watching this video. So here, you're gonna provide the model, and we're gonna use the Gemini. Let me copy that, which is this one, and then replace with that. Now that we have the instance of the model, it is time for us to make the request as analyze. Let me call this one as result, which is equal to await the model dot generate content. And in here, we're gonna specify the following as an array. The first one is gonna be the prompt that we are going to let the Gemini AI to do. So I'm gonna paste the prompt here as that. That goes like, analyze this plant image and provide detailed analysis of its species, health and care recommendation, its features, care instructions, and any interesting facts. Please provide the response in plain text without using any markdown or formatting. And then as a second argument to the generate content is going to be an object. We're going to specify the inline data as that, and then as an object. Then specify the MIME type, and we're going to use the rec.file.mime type. Remember, we have configured our application to use that. Therefore, you can have the MIME type on rec.file.mime type. And lastly, pass in the data that we want to feed into the model. In this case, our image, which is from this one. That is a decoded image. Alright, so below here, we know that everything goes on well. Therefore, I will say plant info is equal to the result dot response. On that, we have what is called text as a method. And lastly, we have to remove the uploaded image from our upload. This is where the fs promises also comes in, as remove the uploaded image, which is equal to await fs promises dot onLink, and pass in the image path. And lastly, we're gonna send the response, and it goes like res.json, and I'm gonna provide results, and I will say it's equal to the plant info, and the actual image I'm gonna use backtick, and I will say data colon rec.file.mime type base 64 comma, and then pass in the image data. In case something goes wrong, let's go ahead and return this. Now, moment of truth, I'm gonna upload this particular image. Let me see, I have it, so let me try. And we have the results as that. Now that we have the response, it is time for us to connect the front end into it. So back to the HTML, I'm gonna scaffold something like that. So I will say hello, and let's make sure that it is working. I'm gonna reload. Let me shut down this one. Now our current application port is 5000 and I have hello. For the HTML, I'm gonna provide you with the starter code, which is this one. Let's look at the structure here. We are using font awesome icon and some custom CSS. Let me collapse that and let's look at the main logic here. These are sample text and that is the usage. Let's focus on the main logic and that is a form. We have a tag called a form with the ID equal to upload form. And we have to specify the end type. In this case, it is called multipart / form data. This means that we are going to accept an image. So the next step is that is the input field. We provide the name as image and then the accept, which is equal to image /*. This means we can accept any file type. And then this is where we're going to have the preview of the image and then the button to click on to analyze. And we have some loading state here with what is called analyzing plant image, and the result will be added here. And then here is a button to generate the PDF. At the moment, we don't have the logic for generating the report on the backend, but we will get there very soon. And this is where we are selecting the individual elements using JavaScript. This is what we call the DOM manipulation. Like I said, the starter code will be provided. Let's focus on the main logic. Now that we have selected the individual element, let's begin with the first logic. That is the dropping of the images on the canvas. But before that, let's preview it and we have something like this. We are going to implement the drag and drop feature. At the moment, it is not working. And remember, we have the field called drop area, which is this. Let's locate it, the actual tag or the element, which is this one. We have a div that wraps the form. So we're going to use a method called add event listener. So below here, the HTML instead. So I will say comment the handling drop event. And it goes like this, the drop area dot add event listener. The first method is going to be click event. And then we're going to pass in image input dot click. Remember, we have the image input here as this one, that is a field. And the next step is that you're going to add the drop area dot add event listener. This time around, the event here is called drag over, and we have access to the event. So we're going to prevent the default as event dot prevent default. And next step is that we're going to give it some background color as drop area dot style dot background color. We are using JavaScript to add some CSS to our page. For the color, I'm going to use, for the color, I prefer this one. And last step is going to be drop area dot add event listener. And the method here is equal to drag leave. When the user moves the cursor from that, we're going to change the background color as drop area dot styles, then the background color as empty. Let's try out. If I drag this one to that, as you can see the background color being changing. And if I move away, it also changes as that. That's the purpose for this. If we change this one to red, let's try out, reload, and drag an image on that, and we have the red color. But I prefer to use this color. Alright, so let me remove the search here. Alright. The next event is going to be the actual dropping is equal to drop area dot add event listener, and the event here is equal to drop. So I'm going to elect something like drop image here. So if I reload and if I drop an image on it, we have the event being fired. This means that this event is working. Now that it's working, we are going to prevent the default as event.prevent default. Then the background color is equal to empty. The next one is we're going to access the file. So it's equal to const the file, which is equal to event.data transfer. And that is when using the drag and drop, we can access the image on a method or property called transfer. We're going to access the first index. So let's check in case we have a file as file. So in case we have a file and then the extension starts with image, then we are going to take the input.files and assign the value as event. Ours is event.data transfers as that. And we're gonna have a function called handle upload image and pass in the file that we want to upload. At the moment, we don't have that function, and we will go ahead and add that. And the last event for the dropping is equal to drop area dot add event listener, and the event here is equal to change. In case we have that event, then we are going to access the image in the input as that. And in case we have a file that also starts with the image, then we're going to use our function called handle upload image and pass in the file. Let's go ahead and have the function as function, and then this function will take in the file that we want to upload. And in here, I'm gonna have what is called reader is equal to new instance of file reader. So what is the purpose of the file reader here? Remember, this is a built-in JavaScript object that allows web applications to read the content of files stored on the user's computer. It is typically used to read files selected by a user through the input type called file. So now that we have the instance of the file reader, we are going to use a method called reader.onload and then equal to a function. I prefer to use normal function here and remove this. And in the function, we have access to the event. So the purpose for this is that we want to preview the image. So in here, remember, we have the input or the element as image preview. So let's go ahead and call that one and use a property called else, which is equal to the event.target.result. And then let's use the styling as style.display is equal to block. And lastly, we're gonna have a method called reader.read as data URL. And this method will help us to preview the image. Now it's time for us to implement the main logic for the upload. So I will say the upload form or the upload form logic. And we're going to use the field called upload form, which is this one. Remember, we have the form by providing an ID called upload form. So we are going to add event listeners on that. So below here is equal to the upload form dot add event listener, and the event here is equal to submit. And then in the callback function, we are going to prevent the default. And let me change this one to E for short. So in here, we're going to apply some CSS and that is a loading div. By default, it is hidden. So as soon as the user click on the submit, we are going to show that loading. This is where style.display is equal to block. And next step is that the result.style, we're going to say none. We don't want to show the result while it is loading. And also the result.inner HTML is equal to empty. Let me use text content instead of inner HTML. And also the download button, we're going to hide that one as download button dot style is equal to none. Then below here, we're going to talk to our backend API by using try and catch. We are going to use the built-in fetch API, which is equal to fetch, and pass in the endpoint. In this case, it is called analyze, as you saw over here as analyze. So let me assign to a variable called response, which is equal to await that. Then in the object here, you're going to specify the method. In this case, it is post. Then the body is equal to the form data. And let's have instance to the form data as const. Form data is equal to new form data. Then pass in the event dot target. So pass in the body and I'm going to use the form data. Then let's get the actual data, which is equal to await res.json. So in case we have the result from the API, and that is data.result. Remember, at the backend, we are returning as what? Let me check as result. So we can access the data as what? Data.result. Then in here, we're going to take the analysis HTML by assigning the result to it. And also the analysis image, which is equal to analysis image by using data.image. Remember, we are also returning the image back to the user as that. Then after that, we are going to take the result div. Let's see in the HTML. I'm going to have the result div. Let me search as result here. In this case, this one. This means we are going to inject some HTML over here, and we have selected that as result div. So I'm going to paste the HTML that we are going to inject as result div.inner HTML. We are using inner HTML because we are going to embed some special tags and then replacing by using this regular expression. And next step is that the result div, we're going to bring it back as block. And also the download button also block. And then the loading is equal to none. So else here, then in here, we know that we have an error. We're going to take the result div dot text content, which is equal to the error as data.error. Remember also, we are returning the error as that. Therefore, we can access it here as data.error. And also, let's bring back the result.style. And then .display is equal to block. So I'm going to try by selecting an image and analyze. And we have the result. But we still see the analyzing. So let's bring finally. And we will say that the loading div is equal to none. Let's try out and upload this image, analyze, and indeed it is working. What has left is the downloading as PDF or the report. So let's just do that, and that is the download logic. So first of all, we are going to pass what is called Express.js. and then bring comma here. So this is a middleware that's going to allow us to accept the incoming JSON data into this particular route. So in here, we will need the result and then the actual message before we can generate the report. So I will say const, then result, and then the image that we want to add to the report as rec.body. And then let's bring in the try and catch block. Then in here, we are going to generate the PDF report as const file name is equal to, we're going to add this name to our file as plant analysis and add the date to it. And then next step is the file as const file path. Before this, unless we have the directory as this, so we have to make sure that the directory exists. That is, ensure the report directory exists. So here is equal to const report directory is equal to path.join, and then pass in their name and then the folder name as report. If it doesn't exist, then we are going to create that one by saying await promises.mkdir, then the report directory by using recursive is equal to true. So for the path here is equal to the path.join and pass in the directory name and then the file name. Next step is we have to write the stream for this file as const write stream, which is equal to fs.create_write_stream and pass in the path. Then we have to have instance of the PDFKit. Let's make sure that we are importing it. Yes, we have it here, but let me rename to PDF document to make it more meaningful. So let's get into the download and I will say const, then the doc is equal to new, the PDF document. And lastly, we have to pipe it by using the write stream. Then below here, we are going to add content to the PDF. For example, the font size, the text, and others. So I will say the doc.font size. Then pass in font size of 24 and use the text that you want to inject. And I will say plant analysis report. And then provide a line to be center for that text. Then we have to move the doc as move down. Let's also add the date by saying the doc.font size of 24 and add the text. For this one, I'm going to use the backtick and I will say date $$ as new date to local string. And then remove this one and let's bring the move down here to have some spacing between the title and then the date. And next one is going to be, after this, is going to be the font size of 14. That is the actual result. So in here, I'm going to remove this one from here and pass in the actual result and object specify the alignment of that as left, as align left. Now it's time for us to insert the image into the PDF as insert image to the PDF, which is equal to, in case we have the image, then in here we want the base 64 data, and to get that I'm going to use some scary syntax here. And you can Google around to get the base data from an image by using this syntax. And next step is the image buffer, which is equal to buffer.from and pass in the base 64 data and then the encoding type. And we have to bring the move down method here to have some spacing. And then next step is the doc image and then pass in the image buffer by specifying the fit, which is equal to 500, 300, align, center, and vertical alignment, which is also center. And lastly, we are going to use doc.end. It's time for us to download the PDF, but before that, we have to wait for the PDF to be written before downloading. So I will say wait for the PDF to be created or written, which is equal to await the promise as new promise, and then pass in our callback function, which is resolve, and then the reject. For this, I'm going to use arrow function and pass in the write stream.on and pass in the finish and the resolve. In case we have an error, pass in the error. And it's time for us to download by using what is called response. We have a method called download and then pass in the file path. And then the callback function, in case something goes wrong, we're gonna log the error. So in case we have an error, then we're gonna throw an error, or let me send something like res.status by providing 500 as that and .json, which is equal to error downloading the PDF report. And below here, we know that everything is fine. Then we're gonna use fs promises dot onLink. We're gonna remove the save images in our computer. And that is it. And in the catch block here, we are going to just console log, or we can return something back to the user. So now the endpoint is working. What has left is the front end. So let's get into the front end to integrate the downloading. Remember, we have the download button, which is this one. We are going to add event listener on that as download btn.add event listener. So in here, we're gonna talk to our API as const response is equal to await, then the fetch API, and pass in the endpoint as download. Then specify the method as post, then the headers, which is equal to object, and specify the content type as application/JSON, and then the body. After this, specify the body, and we have to stringify it by passing in the result, then the image. So in case everything is okay, which is in case the response.okay, then we can go ahead and download the data by saying that const blob is equal to await, which is equal to the response.blob, where I have to mark the function as async here. And let's get the URL, which is equal to the window.url, and create object URL and pass in the blob. Next step is we're gonna create the link tag. So it's equal to const a, which is equal to document.create element. We're gonna create the a tag. So lastly, we're gonna append the href, which is equal to the URL as that, and append a.download, which is equal to, let me use this as plant analysis report. And then I'm gonna append by using document.body.append child, which is equal to a. That is our tag. Remember, we have to add the element that we have created to the DOM. And lastly, a.click, and then the remove child. Else, we're gonna elect by saying that error response.status. And that is it. So moment of truth. Reload. let me upload this and analyze. You got it, and you got the result. Let me bring it back here, open that, and you got the report. All right guys, so here ends this project.